Kia ora rā tātou. Tātou hui mai roto I tēnei whare e rungi I te hihia kia whai atu I te whai au I te ao mārama. Nā koena te whare e noho nei tātou I tēnei wā. Koe anō kei ware hoki rātou e takoto mai ana I te imuru ikara. Rātou ngā hoia. Me ngā tangata hoki o te iwi whai mana I tēnei wāhi o hene mutu nei, nō reira te hunga kāinga Ngāti whakaue. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Aha koa, ko te ākoe nei, he hunga hi koi tātou. Nō reira mehe mea, ko tā tātou mai he takahi rungi te whenua, āhua toko maha, engari mo tēnei mea te noho kua whai iti tātou. Koe anō. Nau mai, hara mai. Pai hoki te kiti e te o koutou o ina nahi, ko hoki mai I te rangi nei. E hari te mea me mihi ki a koutou katoa, ia tangata engari Charlene, kua whai huru koe e pai ai te haere o tō mutuka. Me tūau ki te mihi ki a koe me te pai o taringa I rongo I taku mutuka e kā tonu ana. Ki te kore koe kua raru pai tēnei a kua au te tehi kāre no kia tai mai ki tēnei hui rungi tērā. Nō reira, kai te mihi atu.
I'll get you tonight.
Hoi anō, kia timata tā tātou hui, kei noi tātou. E te rungaraua manaki ha mātou, hui nei anō, aha kua tō mātou toko iti, he nui ngā tangata kei o mātou tuara, kei te wahaina. Ko tā mātou mahi, ko te āta whiriwhiri, te āta whakamōhio, kia tika wā mātou mahi katoa, hei aha, tuatahi hei painga mō te whenua, tuarua hei painga mō te uri whakatupu. Nō reira, ko mātou e noho poto nei rungi te mato o te whenua I noi atunga ki a koe, kia āta arehina mātou, kia pai ai ngā mea ka pute I a mātou I tēnei rā. Āmeni. Kia ora koutou.
Recording in progress.
Thank you.
Ina koutou. Sorry to be beaming in from you from afar. Ko tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe unuku. Ko takoto te mihi whakamuimiti ki tō tātou ātu I te rangi, nō reira tēnā koe. O te rā ki a koutou e tahau kāinga, koutou nā kanohi o ta puare nei, koutou katoa e mahi tahi ana ki te hāpai I tēnei kaupapa whakahirehira, nō reira ko tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Koutou hoki e whakarongo mai, e whakarongo ana I rungi te pai hono, Zoom, nō reira koutou katoa. Nau mai hara mai ki te hui nei. Leo Watson's my name. I'm just helping to facilitate the hui today, but due to some personal circumstances had to stay in the Hawke's Bay. So my apologies, I can't be with you in person. I'm just going to do a sound test again. It's hard to judge if this is coming through okay. Alex, can you hear me okay, just with a wave of the hand?
We can hear you.
Kia ora. So if I can ask the slides to go up, we are going to just have Alex help us with some preliminary housekeeping matters. If we can just have you take us through, Alex, perhaps some health and safety measures inside the whare and other matters, and then just discuss with those who are online and those who are there how they would wish to participate during the hui by asking questions and having their time to have a kōrero. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora Leo, tēnā tātou katoa, ko Alex Wilson tōku ingoa. I'm one of the accountants for Deloitte, but also working for Te Tumu Kaituna 14 Trust. I'll help facilitate today's session alongside sort of Leo. Kurt, our slides are not sort of going forward, but I might get you to sort of click them forward as we're going through. So, try now? There we go, ka pai. So just explain a few housekeeping rules in the event of a fire. I think we'll sort of congregate outside towards Surupika, just at the side here. Our toilets are at the back. We've got the men's toilets over here, our women's toilets over there as well. As I noted, I'll work alongside Leo Unfortunately, he's got some personal circumstances. He can't be here today, so it seems to be working okay. The sound seems to be working fine. Leo, we can hear you, so you should be able to facilitate fairly well from your end. Those that are online, we've got a couple of people that are sort of starting to come online. If you do have a question or do want to speak, there's a raise your hand button down the bottom there, and I'll just flag to Leo, or Leo will be able to see it as well. For those that are here today and do want a kōrero, we're sort of mindful when we were back in Tamata Kapua that we were, people that were speaking had their backs, I suppose, to the rest of the owners. So what we've done is we've set up a little bit of a microphone there by the speaker. So if you want to get up and have a kōrero, it's not impersonal. You're not sort of facing your back towards anyone. Hopefully, makes it a little bit better. Those that are online, if you do want to ask a question, we've got the chat function down the bottom there, and we'll be monitoring that. Also, those that are online, I'm just taking your registrations too. So if I'm not quite sure who you are, I'll just flick you a little private message to sort of find you on the share register. I think that's probably about it. Leo, I'll hand it back to you to sort of carry on with our hui, and I'll click through our slides.
Kia ora, Alex. We've got the trustees there, and we've got some apologies too from some who aren't able to make it. So I wonder if someone there can just introduce the trustees to our hui, please.
Should we start with Yonka Malcolm and make our way around the table just to do introductions? We're live. The ones online can hear us, but we don't need the microphones.
Kia ora tātou, I'm Malcolm Short, Chairman of the 14 Trust. Have been so for a number of years now. I took over from famous Loki or Cecil Hayward. So that's me. I'm based here in Rotorua. My day job is also running another iwi trust here is the Pukeroa Orua Whara Trust. So that's my background in my administration of Maryland. I've been doing that for 30 odd years. So that's me. Thank you. And welcome you all to the hui.
Kia ora no tātou, ko anu tu pirua a tēnei nā, anō nā te rangi wewahi. Koe rā, kia ora.
Kia ora no rā tātou. Ko wainuku whēho taku ingo no ngā te rangi wehi, Waitaha hoki. Me Ngāti He, koina pēau e he ai e te hiwa. Hoi anō, ko au te tihonga uri o te whānau o te kapai waho. Nō reira, kei te kite hoki e te hi whanaunga i roto i te wharenei. Tēnā tātou katoa.
Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Kia ora whānau katoa, ko Emere Kān Malaka hau, ko Ngāti Rangiwuhi, Tuharangi, Waitaha, Ngāti He, kei Rotorua hau. Sorry I'm not able to be with you today. I'm just coming out of isolation for COVID. Kia ora, have a good hui.
Kia ora, Emily. Just put your mute back on. And we've got an apology from Waldo Ho here, I think. Right, Unuku? I can't see him.
Ai. He hui anō kei te tai rāwhiti.
Kia ora.
Mea whānau.
All right, if we can just look at the agenda here. We've got an apology register physically there in the hui, but also for those online, if there are those who you know would have wished to have been at our hui, we ask you just to put their names into the chat function. I think that Alex has taken us through the logistics of that, but I just wanted to note too that if there are those online who are sitting with others in your room who are owners, if you can let us know for our register and for our records as to who is in your whare or in your room listening to our kōrero too, especially if there are contact details that you might wish to send through to us to make sure we can get information out to you, and if addresses have changed recently, Then we've got Amber Tare who can assist with that. I'm just seeing if she's online. It may be possible for you to send it through on the chat function and direct it to Alex Wilson. And then you're not necessarily sharing your address with everyone online. But we really do encourage that, please, that you let us know if there are changes of emails or addresses to help us communicate with you effectively. Just noting the minutes of the previous hui have been posted up on the website, and the same with this one, so that you can review those at your leisure. So what we're going to do today is briefly summarize some of the earlier presentations, but really get into some of the feedback that we've been receiving from owners through this engagement process, and looking at the way in which owners are reacting to the trustees' guiding principles, to the election and rotation proposals, and also to these access and use rights that have been discussed across your land in order to open up the Tumu Kaituna 14 block for potential for development, housing, economic aspirations and the like. We're going to discuss those owner feedback through a number of mechanisms. And we're also picking up on some of the themes that we're coming through from our workshops with owners, particularly around ensuring that there is what we call a culturally focused urban planning. The idea that when you see yourselves on the whenua, it needs to be clearly of your hapu, of your iwi, of your mana whenua, and not a repeat necessarily of the urban planning that's been happening in that area there. Some other ideas have come through strongly from the workshops, which we want to reflect back to you today. There's been some requests for more information around the environmental impact and climate change, so we're going to discuss that. And then we're going to move to quite an important part of this, is discussing how might the next steps unfold, voting processes, and also I'm going to put up a couple of draft resolutions. There would be no voting at this hui. It's simply a chance for you to read what the resolutions might look like and allow you as owners to feed back to the trust, either by way of amendments or additions and further comments. So that's our hui agenda today. If we can go to the next slide, please. Unuku, I wonder if you would be able to share some of the kōrero you've got about the historical and cultural significance. And I wonder too, if while you're standing, you might just want to reflect on the site visit that was held yesterday on the land. And perhaps, I know you took some of those owners down to the beach as well. Just some of the comments you might have received, so that you can give other owners who were not there at the site visit a chance to catch up on that, I think, very important occasion. Tēnā koe.
Yeah. Will I see the slides?
See them up there, yeah.
Tēnā koutou. Most of you have seen this, and there's a saying that history never repeats, but for some of you it's been repeating so many times. You might be a bit tired of it. But it was really pleasing on the visit yesterday that some of you had retained some of the information given out previously, and then asked some questions directly related to that, which was really good. But if we can just quickly get through that before I get onto the comments, as Leo has asked, and this is online, so take your time to see it. It's just basically a very special canoe arrives, people settle around the area for about 300 years. Next one, and then people come from the east coast and think that they really like the Tumu Kaituna 14 in that area, take it over. But then, on the next slide, Te Arawa came back with a vengeance, and on the 23rd of April, 1836, the Tumu battle took place, which returned basically the sea frontage back to Te Arawa from Pukehina through to the Papamoa domain in downtown Papamoa. And the people that claimed the territory, Ngāti Whakaue from here, Ngāti Tūnohopu separately from here, and then The big three, Ngāti Rangi Uhi, Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere, Ngāti Uanuku Kōpako. And almost everybody in this room will be, whether you know it or not, from one of those three or from some of the giftees that were put in the original adjudication. Can we move on to the next slide? This is one thing good about, thanks Charlie. As you can see up here is Tumu Matawhero on the western border of the property, and then Papamoa itself is up here further. This map is quite old, but our block basically fits where my hand is back to the western border there. Just here was an old car site. That's Te Karaka, which we saw behind the casuarina trees when we went around last time. And there was another part down here, which is not really well noted. That was Te Kōpua, and that was the main part for Ngāti Uanuku Kōpako and Ngāti Rangi Te Aorere. Te Karaka, what I mentioned before, that was the main part for Ngāti Rangi Uahi. And as you moved on, there were a series of pa here, mainly with Ngāti Whakaue. But of course, this one here is Te Tumu itself, and that was the battle that returned everything to Te Aroa. There was a Ngaitarangi pa, mainly Ngāti He, where two of your trustees are also from Ngāti He, so we're sort of beating ourselves up still. But now there's a cut through there. The river used to wind all its way to there, all the way down to the Makatu outlet. But now there's the cut, and there's another large land block here called Papahi Kahawai. We'll get to that shortly. Okay, so that's where, and the land to Tumu extended all the way down the bottom here as well. Okay, but that's all gone. It's all sold. Okay, next please. That's the first court case in 1883, when it was decided that the three hapu plus Whakaue plus Tunahoku would be the owners of the land. Okay. And you can see here who the shareholders were. But moving on, that's fine. Moving on. And then at the end of it, all we had was these three blocks. Number one, which started at all Tumu Matawhero, which was Uanuku Kōpako. Then number two, Rangi Te Aorere, and then this one here was Ngāti Rangi Uahi. Below the river, and sorry I couldn't find a map, it was really good to show you, but down below was number 4, which was Rangi Uahi, number 5, Rangi Te Aorere, number 6, Ngāti Uanuku Kōpako. But that's all sold and it's now wetlands, bike riding area. Okay, that's fine. Keep going on. Oh, sorry, no, don't. Because you can see there what the relative acreage was. Okay, so up the top, Uanuku Kōpako 156, and just follow those figures down to the bottom to see what the relative size of each of the hapus was awarded. Next one. And then in 1890, it says 13 blocks. That's incorrect. It was, I made a mistake. There were 12 the Tumu Kaituna blocks. I've already talked about 1, 2, 3, which is now 14. 4, 5, 6 that are sold. And then continuing towards the east, you had 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. Thank you. And 2 of the witnesses stayed on, but Rangi Te Aorere had changed this from a Te Aorere Kōtuku to Hemi Kōkiri, and he's the ancestor of the current chair. Okay, thank you. Now, just to give you an idea, the Tumu Kaituna came down here, and then went all the way towards here and up. See this line here? That was the bottom of the Tumu Kaituna blocks at that time. That's all gone, and what's left is us, Tumu Kaituna 14, 7B1, 7B2, part of 8, and a tiny remnant of 11 down at the end of the block. So the history started with a battle, and battles aren't good things to start with unless you're the winner. But the sad part of the story is all that time in court arguing the case, and now so much of it is gone. Thank you. That's it, I think, for the slides. But I just want to pick up, I hope you didn't get too bored with me yesterday, but when you just, even if you're looking at maps, they're helpful, but it's really good to be on the land. And so you can sort of start. No,
Unuku, tēnā koe, kia ora. Can I just get you to move back to the move back to the mic?
Sorry, Leo, I thought that, usually when you start up means I've got to stop talking. But going back to being back on the land really gives people, I don't know, something comes up from the ground inside of you when you're there to make you feel in a different way. But the good thing about a map is that when you're standing on the ground, you can't see all of the block. So the two things together, and a lot of you have got maps today. So try to get a good sense of the breadth and length of the block, and then look on here on site for a bit of historical information to flesh it out. The time down at the beach was really good. I think we enjoyed that. I did. I even enjoyed some of the challenges. You've got to be careful what you say because you can upset people, but it worked out well. If there's anything quickly that's not going to get Leo upset or me confused, if there's anything that came up from yesterday that you want to follow up, particularly with me because it's history, money, don't ask me about money, then please catch up with me at the end of this hui. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora. Tēnā koe unuku. And also, what was pleasing, I think, about the site visit, as I understand it, is that it went beyond the actual boundaries of the block, and the buses carried on down through that whole area, as you've discussed. And I was reflecting on Arthur Flintoff's comments over the hui and others who have reminded us all that the Kaituna 14 block sits within a wider cultural context, a wider cultural landscape, and to be mindful of that, both from an environmental point of view and of course from a cultural point of view in terms of development. So it sounded like a really successful site visit, and thank you to those owners who participated. Kei te pai. All right, if we can move on to the next slide, please. There have been a number of previous presentations, so we were trying to find the right balance between catching people up who haven't necessarily participated previously, but also not just repeating previous material. So what we're going to do is just note the key topics and then encourage those who are wanting more information to please contact the Trust or go back to the Trust website. All of the presentations and the hui and the recordings of the hui are all on the web. But if it's a lot of material to get through, I'd pick up Uanuku's invitation there to all of the owners to contact the trustees through the website or through the addresses that are on there and ask specific questions. I know that some of the owners have done so and they got full answers back. So we do encourage that. The guiding principles, the elections and rotation proposals for trustees, the housing proposals, what's happening out at your block in terms of what's called Te Tumu development, and the idea of access rights and use rights across your whenua to unlock the potential have all been the subject of presentations previously. So we're going to touch on those today, but not go into considerable detail. Can I go to the next slide? We had put up these or the Trust had put up these guiding principles at the start, and I can report that through the context of the consultation with owners, there's been close to unanimous support for the way in which these principles are reflecting the right sort of parameters for how this challenge ahead of the owners should be faced. What we've done is added in a little clause there at the top, that these principles are all for the benefit of Tumu Kaituna 14 owners. And I'm trying to reflect the fact that some of the owners were cynical about the fact that your land might be being used for the benefit of others. But in fact, these principles and the underlying proposals are all for the benefit of you as owners, and not trying to kowtow to the council or to others who may be also landowners in the area. I think that's a really important to reflect that back to owners who had those concerns. So there's the prohibition really on selling any of your land. That development can occur without selling it, to making sure that your history and your cultural identity is absolutely represented and respected. And even to the extent where we'll come to this, there have been ideas about how that could really be visible on the land in terms of the development planning. Housing is a big issue, community spaces, so people who don't necessarily want to live on the land, but how to ensure they have access to the whenua and to be able to enjoy its open spaces, even right through to camping on the site. And then you've got a series of commercial opportunities, employment, education, training, and income opportunities, all of which are intended to create a sustainable benefit for owners who may be overseas or living away from the rohe, but still have a right to benefit from what's happening on the land. Kia ora, next slide, please. Alex, can I just ask you to take us through this slide very briefly around what's happened in the past and where this hui sits in the schedule of the hui that we're running?
Ka pai. It can do, Leo. So I think as Leo's mentioned, and most of you know, we've tried to enhance the engagement with the owners over the past couple of months since sort of February. So we've held a number of engagement hui. Now there hasn't been any sort of voting, it's more to sort of inform you. And as each of those hui has progressed, we've tried to sort of build upon listening to the feedback, what you guys want to hear, what the owners want to hear, and sort of trying to dig into a little bit more detail to give you some answers to some of the questions that we've sort of talked about. So up on the slides, we've got basically all the engagement hui that we've undertaken to date. Hui sort of 1 to 3 were really more presenting information to you, but also listening to the kōrero via Zoom. Those first earlier ones were electronic, unfortunately, because it was the heat of when COVID was occurring. But we've opened it up to more sort of wānanga style, I suppose. Workshops 1 and 2 on the 26th and 30th of April, where it gives an opportunity to really have the owners be able to sort of speak their mind and bring to the table some ideas of their own. We've had the, as we mentioned, the site visit, or the block visit sort of yesterday, and this one here is another platform for everyone to sort of get up and speak. So at some point through the hui, if you wanted the opportunity to come up with kōrero and share your thoughts, by all means do so. We are looking to have another hui number 5 in June sometimes. A date's yet to be set. At that time we'll have hopefully some more resolutions, formal resolutions for people to sort of vote on. But we'll look to introduce resolutions today and get some feedback on it, so everyone's got a heads up. They're not surprises, there's no hidden agendas or anything like that. Anything else to add there, Leo?
No, thank you, mate. That's very good. Just a thing about processes is we want feedback on the substance of the proposals, but also feedback on how we are communicating and the hui process too. So for instance, some had specifically requested workshop opportunities, so those were put on. There was a request for site visits, and that's happened. So please do feel free to comment on the way in which this is being rolled out as well, to make sure you are feeling engaged. Thank you. Next slide, please. What I've done is put together just some key themes that were coming to me as the facilitator of these hui, trying to pick up on what owners are saying. There are a number of avenues for feedback, and we've been really, really pleased by the amount of feedback that's come in. So this slide won't be comprehensive, but I think it's just trying to aim to to the big headings. There was a call to improve trust communication and transparency with owners. So I think that's been a real considerable effort this year to do that. And we've received real positive feedback about that. There was a call for more regular elections of trustees, and some you will have seen had sought a full election of trustees immediately. The trustees have proposed elections this year, 2022, which I'll discuss, and then a rotation system starting in 2023. And they consider that that's achieving a really strong balance between continuity and fresh opportunity for new voices to come on to the trustee table. There has been a concern, as I said, that the development of the whenua seemed to be for the benefit of others and not for TK14 owners. So just to reiterate, the focus is on the TK14 owners and always has been. When we talk about access and use rights that might be granted for others to use, it's to unlock the Tumu Kaituna 14 land, its potential, and then to really achieve those guiding principles that were set out before. In other words, it's all very well to have an aspiration to have housing on the land, have income streams, have employment opportunities, but how do you actually realize that? And that's the challenge that's facing the trustees. There's an opportunity here to do that, and they're proposing ways in which that might happen. I think there's been a clear theme about a desire to see any urban development on your whenua have a visible cultural identity. And there's been some ideas come forward. Health centres, a marae, ensuring the housing is affordable and accessible to owners. The idea of having a development that's unique to you and your identity. And so that's really been really valuable. The trustees agree with that, and I understand there's going to be further discussion today at the next tui about making that a reality. There's been good challenges in testing the assumptions as to environmental impacts and climate change. One, the major issue, making sure that the trust future-proofs any development out on your whenua and takes into account the significant challenges faced by climate change. So just totally agree with that. There have been environmental reports now posted up on the web, and we've got a discussion about that today. And I really welcome those who have expertise in this area within the owners to engage fully on this. There's not going to be one answer that meets everyone's. This is very much a difficult exercise to predict, but we have to work off best information. And to be able to share that with you, I think, and get feedback is really important. Next slide, please. Just noting some of the results in terms of the online engagement. There's been an online survey. Only 64 submissions so far, but as our tech man noted, that's actually really quite significant in terms of, say, comparing the number of written submissions that come in on council requests for feedback. But we do ask you to check out the online survey. We're going to put up a slide shortly to give you the details of that and answer the questions. There has been overwhelming support for the trustee guiding principles, majority support for trustee elections and development proposals. There are some who are not in favour, and they have expressed their views as well. So we'll just keep monitoring that and ask for your feedback. But there are other ways in which we've tried to reach out to owners. Facebook, you'll see some numbers there. Website visitor numbers are really significant. A thing called MailChimp, which is where newsletters are sent out. And then, of course, owner questions directly by email or online. This is just to reflect the fact that engagement is happening, but my request to owners has been at each hui, please, you meet the trust halfway. Come forward and give your concerns, your wawata, your aspirations, your hopes and dreams and feedback as well. Next slide, please. That's the survey. You can look at that at haveyoursay.maori.nz or go to it through the TK14 website. It's a really important opportunity for you to have your say on not just the questions that are asked, but there are ways in which you can fill out the boxes to just have your comments on any of the topics that are raised. Down the bottom there's just reflecting some of the owners who have said we should be getting an inventory or a database of the owners and their skills and their needs. So there's an opportunity through the survey, but also just by contacting the trust directly. we had this, like, somebody had mentioned that within their family, you know, there's a doctor, an engineer, and somebody had an architect, there were designers. So the idea of sending through who amongst your whānau and who are connected to the land might want to contribute in the future, and having a database of that is really useful. But also your needs, housing, education, others. Have you got young ones in your whare who are showing a particular interest in a particular area of education or of seeking certain qualifications? The idea of putting forward to the trustees, hey, you know, this is our sort of needs in this space. How can you help to facilitate that? And that, I think, is a really good two-way process. Same with housing. The idea of building up a real good sense of who wants to come back to the land if housing opportunities could be made available. What constraints do you see might prevent you from doing that? How could the trust help facilitate making that a reality? If you've got small businesses, what are they, and where do you see those small businesses having opportunities out on your land? If you've got environmental skills or other passions, if you are artistic and have skills in that area and can contribute. So I think a real request for owners to get engaged also in that sense, regardless of how you feel about the development proposals. We think to build up that database of skills would be fantastic. Next slide, please. This is just a map that's stripped back and showing the zoning of both your area, which is the triangle-shaped area landowner A, but also the wider Tumu coastline. And the zoning is indicative only, but it's been proposed as trying to find a mix between commercial development, employment areas, housing, what areas, say in green, could not be developed because they are environmentally important, areas for community use, and the like. Within that broad zoning blocks, it's basically a blank sheet in terms of how the owners and the trust might see your land being developed in the future. You know, what I mean by that is the idea of how many houses, where they might be situated, how do they look, what sort of density is involved, the size of the houses to provide for the various families within your ownership. All of that is the subject of considerable planning yet to come. The same with the commercial areas, what might be happening there on your land if those areas were to be set aside for that use, and how to make sure that your owners can take up those opportunities to situate businesses and employment opportunities on your land. Land use activities and so forth are all in the future in terms of urban development. And so this phrase, culturally visible Indigenous urban planning, is to pick up on some themes that have been happening both through your feedback, but also actually around the country in terms of those who are involved in urban planning, a desire to make sure that you and your cultural identity has got a real imprint, real visible imprint on how you do things on your whenua. So the trust is committed to that. And as I said, there's been kōrero about centering perhaps the development around a marae. That is a really positive proposal. It takes a lot of kōrero and thinking. Others have noted that really to have your old people there and your owners generally, but residential care for the elderly, right through to health services dealing with not just rongoa Māori, but at the level of accessing health services in a way that owners are really comfortable, because the data is clear that Māori tend to be cynical and find access to Western health services challenging and difficult. So, you know, really how to make your land service the needs of your people. And of course, be entirely environmentally responsive. And that is right across that whole area, not just on your block, but exercise influence and decision-making right across the environmental space as to how your waterways are being used, your mahi ngakai, your wāhi tapu, your coastline. So we've really heard that feedback, and it sits consistently with what the trustees have been saying as well. I just leave that map there then to say this is the opportunity to not see this as a fait accompli, as a done deal, but to see how this opportunity at your block might be used best for your owners. It is clear that the blocks to the right there are also going to benefit from this wider, what they call Tumu development. That's absolutely important to say, the way in which the routes cross the land and open up other blocks. So some have interpreted that as being the Tumu Kaituna 14 owners have been asked to give away something in order to benefit others. And I just want to reflect on that theme because I haven't seen that in the way in which I've been listening to the trustees and their responses. They are seeing their block, your block, as strategically located, and that this is an opportunity to create something on your block that would not otherwise be possible. Okay, so next slide, please. I'm going to just one. Yeah, thank you. Trustee elections. Who wants to speak to this? I wonder, Malcolm, perhaps if you want to just talk about these two processes that are happening, both the elections that are due this year for the vacancies, and then the separate process of trustee rotations, and then I can pick up on maybe on the detail of those. Would that be all right?
That's fine, yes. So, as Leo says, that proposal is to bring that forward. The election process is number one, which we need to go through that process with the Maryland Court to approve, because in the current trust order there's actually no direction on the format that the elections will or should, the format that we should adopt. So we will be putting that forward with the proposal to hold that election for the vacant spaces on the trust, bringing it up to 7 in total, and planning to follow that with the start of the rotational system and bring that in. The first one is proposed for 23 next year. So that's where we're at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Maybe if I get Unuku, the next slide just talks about the proposal as it stands. So if we just go to the next slide with the details around the rotation proposal for next year, maybe if you just want to take us through that, because there's been, I think, a proposal that was put forward and slightly amended during the course of the feedback from these hui, particularly around the hapu seats. And I know, Anaru, you're interested in this too. I'm just interested if those trustees could help us go through this slide and talk to some of the proposals for the rotation proposal.
Yes, what we're looking at is not dissimilar to the case for Māori wards and such in various councils around the country. And this is a Māori ward within a Māori ward, so to speak. Because of the history of the block, we're trying to strike a balance between the initial award that was given to the 3 hapu, and at the same time recognise all those people that usually, because they fall in love with somebody from somewhere else and then move somewhere else, and we have a large number of shareholders who don't strongly connect yet with one of those 3 base hapu, but a shareholder. So we've got to strike a balance as to how to reflect our history, and number 2 there, to maintain our cultural and historical links, whilst at the same time making sure that we're embracing everybody. So if you can try to think of this idea that once if the rotation goes ahead, and there are, as you can see up, every 2 years there's 2 new trustee positions, but as time goes on, working towards the fact that there's somebody who is going to be, besides being a trustee for everyone, also has the special role of making sure that their particular hapu is kept in the loop. Because if we look at what's happening here today, I mean, I greet the 5,200 of you who have gathered here today. So how do we ensure that we're looking after the interests of people who don't get tūhui? And for that matter, for those, there's a large number of people, shareholders, who have already died. Sorry? Yep.
I was never sent a letter. And then my husband got one. We're both in Tumu 14. So I want to know what's going on there. This is what I came today. He gets a letter and I don't.
All right. I can't answer exactly what the answer to that is, but by all means, by the end of this week, can you make sure, perhaps with Alex here, that he can check the register of addresses that he's got? And if you're not there, there's been some mistake made along the way, and we'll get...
Oh, I'm there. I run the office.
And you still didn't get a letter?
And I asked whoever was on the desk, and I said, when did the letters get sent out? And she said to me on the 10th. Now, I run DX, who do the mail. Their date stamp was the 17th of May. We got it Friday.
All right. I'm sorry I can't answer that, but there will be someone who can. Yeah. Alex, do you want to talk to that now or later?
Might even listen to it later. Looks like there's going to be plenty of errors along that whole logistical train.
All right, but it's all right to move on with the topic, yeah. All right, so one of the, to make sure that we've got a person who answers to Ngāti Rangiuahi and to Ngāti Uenu Kōpako and to Ngāti Rangi Tāorere. In that mix of 7 people at the end, the ideal that's going to be strived for, that there will be 3 trustees who cannot work just for their hapu, but will work on behalf of everyone, but they've also got to keep up those direct links with the hapu. All right? And hopefully you'll be all right with that balance, and that 4 trustees may not feel personally themselves, they might feel more Ngāti Porou or more Ngāpuhi than anything else, whilst understanding that yes, they have a link, but it's for those 3 to make sure those links are kept strong. And we hope that balance is right, that a lot of people don't feel alienated. It was brought up at the last meeting by Georgina De Fata. She was concerned that she said, I couldn't go to any of those marae and ask, she didn't feel brave enough to go to any marae and ask for the endorsement. Perfectly fine. We don't want to keep people out of got talent. And so the balance is more to those who won't require an endorsement for their hapu, but 3 will, because they will be charged with ensuring that their hapu know and are involved. Kia ora hoa. Yeah, good debate.
Tēnā tātou kato. Hamuera Hodge, my family, we're from Rangi Te Aorere, Unuku Kōpako, Rangi Uwe. And we've been having problems with the Pukero Rūwhata. I have been since 2005, trying to find out how to get in there and sort our whenua out properly. And the last kōrero I had was Pukero Rūwhata. They basically said that the information was only privy to them. And no, I was closed out from there. But kunda mai te ao. Kia whakamāra mo kōrero nei, tu mai mo tāua nei, mo tātou. Te rawa e.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to respond again to what you're saying, but people start out with all the best intentions and then things go wrong along the path. So in this proposal, I want people to really think about what would the benefits be, and then also what can be the problems that will arise. And whatever the situation that in the case with your family in Pukero Rūwhata, maybe that's something to hear from you later to make sure it doesn't, that we don't follow down the same path in the way you're thinking about it. Okay? At the point.
Are you first looking for feedback on this proposal?
Kia ora.
Oh, yes, I understand from Leo. You are? Yeah. Well, Leo's the convener, and yes. Yes.
Tamarie kia tātou, ngā mihi kia tātou kua hui hui mai nei I roto I tō tātou nei whare te ao marama. And I guess the hope is that at the end of this hui we will be in te ao marama, the world of light. I've just got a couple of responses to this proposal. And I think I said at the last hui that was held at Tama, I was online because I was COVID bound at home. I had actually proposed that rather than there being a rotation of trustees, that there be all the current trustees resign. Now I know that's a radical suggestion, but it was really based on what I saw as the dysfunction of the trust 2 years ago. And I don't say that lightly. I was at an AGM at Tama 2 years ago, and you know, I've never seen a meeting that was so chaotic. Having said that, I think the trustees in the last 4 or 5 months, I think I would have to say that you've listened to the iwi and you've listened to the owners, and I'm more open to this proposal. I'm not, my whakaaro is certainly no, you know, there are other people maybe that still feel that all the trustees should resign, but you know, I'm more in tune with this idea. As far as the hapu constituent trustees, I'm just thinking that maybe that's just a bit prescriptive. You know, I would kind of expect that all of the trustees have a responsibility not only to shareholders, but to go to iwi hapu hui and you know, share the information in relation to their trusteeship. So in my mind, it might be a bit prescriptive in terms of having 3, it's like a, I don't know, a ward, a hapu ward system. So anyway, those are my whakaaro around the rotation proposal. I noticed that Leo did say that there was a majority of opinion that supported the trustees' proposition around elections. I'd be interested to know what that mix of feedback was. You know, majority can mean, you know, there were three opinions that supported it and 2 that didn't. Just while I'm up, I just wanted to note, as I did at the Tamahui online, that I thought the principles are very, very good. You know, the one around that we won't sell our land, that will, you know, would all be leasehold. And there were some very, very good principles in there. But I think that also I'm interested in hearing from the trustees around the balance of social outcomes for shareholders, and we've heard a lot about those in the principles, and the commercial outcomes. I mean, here we have our chair who chairs a very successful trust, Pōkero Ruawhata, and it's commercially it's very successful. I'm not so sure on the social arm, but you know, I know that from a commercial point of view it's very successful. And I'm just wondering what are the trustees, maybe that's more an Alec Wilson question, you know, what are the commercial benefits to owners that this trust, this land, the shareholding might bring owners? So that's one question I have. The only other query is around, yes, we're sitting at the western end of the block, or the northern, depending on which way you're looking, and we're providing advantage to landowners further south. So surely we must be able to commercialise that strategic advantage we have. You know, I mean, unless we agree to open up, then landowners further down the road can't necessarily access their commercial advantage, and I'm sure that you know, I'm not sure they'll be looking for social outcomes for themselves. They'll be looking for pure commercial ones. So that's my question, is can we commercialise that strategic advantage? And secondly, I as a shareholder, you know, all 75 shares that my whānau trust have, I want to know what the commercial benefits might be for owners. Ka pai, kia ora.
Tēnā koe Paora. Tēnā koutou, those owners also who raised concerns around communication. So I agree that we ask that you just make contact with Alex after the hui and ensure that we get that right. So just in terms of responding, Paora, there was a lot in there in terms of your submission, and it went into the development as well as the trustee rotation system. So I think it might be best if we all try to discuss what you've raised, because they're all actually really, really relevant queries. The first one, just from my perspective, I was the one who talked about majority support, you're right. And that had come out in the context of the online survey and the feedback that was coming online. And I've just checked, it's around the 75% mark at the moment for the development proposals, and it's right up in the high 90s for the election and trustee proposals for guiding principles. But I was very clear that, you know, there's a long way to go through this process, and it's simply given an indication that the trustees are not just keeping on saying the same thing to a group of people who are refusing to accept it. That there has been, I think, a clear indication that there is support for what's happening, but there are concerns as well, and we're trying to reflect those and work through them. Thank you for your comments about the trustee all standing down and then the trustee rotation proposal. I guess as these hui go forward, we are interested to know whether some of these proposals are landing and where owners are feeling about them. You talked about the hapu ward system and a couple of comments there in terms of this proposal around some of the hapu seats, right? So two things to note. Absolutely agree with you that any trustee who stands should have a clear sense of who they are, how they whakapapa to the land, and develop that as part of their journey. They may be well developed already, or they may be coming in with skills to bring, but not necessarily as connected as they would wish to be. And we need to make sure that trustees are able to participate at all those levels. But as part of their obligations as trustees, they must, I quite agree, have a clear connectivity back to their whānau and hapu those that they are representing. So to the extent that this proposal around the 3 hapu seats is trying to sort of suggest that the other trustees don't have that obligation, that's not what was intended at all. And we could make that clear in the proposal. You talked about it perhaps being a bit prescriptive. I've drafted trustees around the country which allow a flexibility here. I guess it was simply a proposal which said there is something in the deed which goes beyond just, oh, you should have a connection with your hapu, and takes it to a level whereby, yes, prescribed, a little bit more detail around that so that it really does happen. That's what we were trying to find a balance for. And those hapu authorities or kaumātua would be, say, required, I don't know, 2 months before elections to receive and hear from nominees, to have a hui whereby they can turn up and say, this is who I am, this is how I connect to you, what are your aspirations as a hapu, so that I can reflect that, and vice versa. So it wasn't trying to be a gateway, but more a prescribed opportunity that says this is important, this sort of thing is important, to have that connectivity. Yeah. There are some other questions you've raised, and really important ones, around what's the balance. Well, firstly, what's the commercial outcomes for us as owners? What's the balance with social outcomes? And are you as trustees making sure that you can really commercialize and take advantage of the strategic positioning of your block? vis-a-vis others who would also be benefiting. So I'm just going to pause there, Paora, and respond to those when we get to the development mechanism, because I want to keep our kōrero, if we can, around the trustee rotational principles. But really appreciate the feedback. I think it's good kōrero. Are there others who wish to comment on the trustee election and rotation principle kōrero?
I suppose I was one of those ones that were pushing it, and it is about retaining that connection with the whenua. And I suppose it is important that there are so many of our people that are looking for their connection back to their people, and it's through the whenua. So you ask about what are the social benefits. I look on that as a social benefit. I look at it as a social benefit of that reconnection. Hey, when I look after your interests now, that's fine. But it's also part of our obligation is to look after our mokopuna that kari anō e whānau mai, that still haven't been born. And it's just to keep everything strong for them. It's to keep those connections up. I can give an opinion as a uri of Ngāti Rangiwewahi, not as Rangiwewahi. So, koina, e tautoko a Rangiwewahi ane te kōrero a Rangiwewahi. A kia ora.
Is there any further kōrero on this particular topic? Oh, come up.
Kia ora whānau, and to the trustees. Ko huri ana te napi Simon ahau. I got my shares at 14 from a karawa, one of my karawas. He's a tōnehi. I whakapapa to the 3 rangiwewahi through Haraki, Uanuku Kōpako and Rangi Te Aorere. I only know those other 2 because my lands are all in with them. So I'm really here to look at this rotation at the moment. I'm trying to gather my thoughts because I'm trying to understand it as well, and I'm only new. This is my 2nd meeting. So I'm with the, what's your name? Paora. The last time I was here, I was looking at the rotation of the trustees and things like that. But I'd like to have all the trustees off as well. The reason being is because new blood, you fellas already have an understanding with council and all of that sort of stuff, and I know that you're trying to help us understand that you're not going to take our land away from us or use it for other people's use. So I heard the guy on there say that that's what he heard, that was his feedback. But as for this here, I think maybe we need to look at full trustees first, change, and then look for this sort of rotation thing. That's my understanding so far. And as for the 3 hapu, you know, people that's representing the 3 hapu, at the end of the day, it's the shareholders. It's for the benefit of all owners. And if you wanted to go as 7 to the 3 hapus, maybe go to Rangi, go to the 3 hapu as a 7 and call a meeting to those people, to our whānau, and say, hey, look, this is what we're looking at. We're trying to catch up with Rangi Te Aorere, Rangi Wewahi, and the other one, Uanuku Kōpako. Now, that will benefit us all if 7 of you go and do that, rather than you're representing that hapu, that hapu, that hapu. Yeah, that's my thoughts. I've only just come on. I've known about this land for a long time, but I've never been able to stand on it, look at it, use it, until yesterday we had a site visit. It was the bomb. I tell you, it was a freezing day, but I was warm. That's how I felt on the whenua. I was looking at my $3 million house, no, but no. But you can't afford that. But anyway, the benefit of all owners, the social side of things, most of our people are homeless. This is everywhere. It's time to unlock our lands so that we can put housing on. Māori Affairs used to be years ago. You could get a $3,000 house, buy it. There must be some way that the government wants to help in this situation, the government, because they know that there's not much housing out there either. So is there Housing New Zealand or whatever that is, Housing Corporation. They've got bugger all houses for the people. So it's not just ours. If you're in any other blocks, ask them to unlock our lands, to let us to be able to live on them. That's the social side of things. I'm not too clever as to business stuff and things like that, but if it works for us, I'm with it. If it's working for us and it's helping our people for the benefit of the owners, yes. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Shareholder, tēnā koe. Great to have your comments, thank you.
Leo, can I respond as well, because I mentioned it first and I want to really annoy people? Is that okay? Or no? And I'll go to the Charlene.
Despite that, he's going to.
Leo, I'm just going to go backwards a bit, and if we try to think about what's happening to our land on one side, tēnei taha, and on this side is what's happening to our hapu. In the past, they were one and the same, nearly, but it's not like that anymore. And the reason is because the Māori Land Court said in 1883 and then in 1890, they said, these are the people of this hapu because the list of names have been given to us by their chiefs. Now, let's say that court case was happening right now, this year. Most of the people that are now in Tumu Kaituna 14 would not be in Tumu Kaituna 14 because Awaho would draw up its list in connection with Haraki, Ngāti Rangiuhi ki Tai, they'd draw up their list. Uenuku Kōpako would draw up their list. Rangi Te Aorere would draw up their list. And most of us would not be on those lists. And that's why we've got to, how do we work on what the intent is of the past, one, and number two, recognising what this sort of land ownership has done to all of us. And what we're trying to do here is keep that first process in place, but at the same time realising this is a te ao hurihuri. People from a hapu, marry, and that had always happened. But at the court, the land court was like kind of when everyone got put in the deep freeze. And, you know, we could say in the past, I'm going to pick on the name Galvin. All right, we knew where the Galvins were from. But there's Galvins, there's a lot of Galvins. And they live all over the place. And the trouble is that because all of us live all over the place, all our shares are all over the place. And so what happens is we concentrate on our share as opposed to why we're there. Now, huri ana, ai te mea kua mau iau tēnā ingoa, te rā kuia. What you said about taking all 7 to the hapu, but you know, that's great, and it'll be a lovely hui, and then it'll be done. What we're trying to ensure is that at least one person is someone who's always at awaho, and make sure they get across to Haraki, because I know that's an issue sometimes. And that's someone who's always out with rangi taorere, and someone who's always engaged in the issues with uanuku kōpako. And going to a land meeting doesn't constitute your Ngāti Rangi Wuwihi mana or your uanuku kōpako mana. So that's why, and so I'm still in favour, even with the arguments against that there are 3 specific. Now, what those, in my way of thinking, those 3 can't be thinking just about their little hapu and make sure their hapu gets an advantage over the other one. That's not the point. The point is communication. And the point is recognising this thing called hapu. The other 4, maybe from one of those, still have connections, but they don't need to go and say, oh, please, koro, please, kui, can you sign this paper for me? Oh, who are you, dear? Oh, I'm such and so. Oh, yes, yeah, and then it's signed off. It's not that. Those other 4 can come from anywhere, no matter how long you've been living apart, and it's what the skills that you have that you bring to the party. And this is what I think we need to do, is we have a specific thing that recognises why we are here, and another 4, along with the 3, 7, that recognise where we are. Because if we don't have the past and the are, alongside the now, how are we going to, our planning for the future will lose all of that, or most of it. Koina taku whakaaro. Okay, kia ora koutou.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep the hui moving. It's hard to read the room there. I'm happy to have further kōrero on the trustee proposal. Alex, if you can see people who wish to speak, or those online. And we can come back to this too during our hui, so I'm not at all suggesting this is the only time we talk about it, but we've got a bit of other take to talk about too. So I am going to suggest that we move on to the next topic. So just before I do, just looking around to see whether we've got other kōrero there. Well, can I just say this, that we're going to put up a draft resolution which tries to capture this just for discussion, and then take it to the next hui as well. So, you know, there's time for this type of kōrero to sink in, for you to go back to your own whānau and to bring back feedback as well. Okay, so let's keep moving then. The next slide just deals with the housing principle. This was really a key issue for a number of the owners, and it is probably one of the main trigger points, I reckon, is to seeing how this development might benefit owners. I know we're going to come to Paula's question around straight commercial benefits, but this housing objective is a key one. There's some information there about what the trustees are doing to try and get feasibility funding to assess how housing might be situated, what's the land and topography, environmental concerns like to be able to accommodate housing, and bring all that sort of information back to owners. So there's a lot of water to go under the bridge there, but it's trying to provide, firstly, the platform for that to occur. Can you go to the next slide? Because that was one of the housing experts that came in, looking at that whole range of housing there, right the way through to private ownership of the housing. I just needed to say that all of these options sit on top of your Māori multiply owned land. So there is no proposal here for the land to be sold. If you were going to have a private owned house, and for that speaker there who was dreaming of the $3 million house, I say dream and make it a reality. You know, that's terrific to hear that sort of kōrero, because that's what it's all about, is aiming high. But that house, for instance, would be the subject of a occupation order through the Māori Land Court, which would allow those owners to invest in their house and then pass that investment on to their successors. So they would own the house outright or have it funded by, say, the Kiwi Bank processors or other mortgages and be able to pay that off. The underlying land, they would have a right to occupy for, as I say, the course of your lifetime and then the course of your successors through the Māori Land Court orders. That doesn't take away it doesn't suggest the partitioning of the land. So there's a lot of detail on housing. We've given that in previous slides and they are available on the website. Just coming back to my point is the more that you as owners can tell the trustees about what your needs are and your aspirations to get back on the block, the more the planning can be sort of aimed to meet your needs. Okay, so the next slide, please. This just looks at what's happening in your broader area. So it shows the Tumu coastline up the top there. It looks at the Rangiuru Business Park there in the forefront, a massive proposal which will impact on your whole rohe as well. The proposed link roads and the town development. So that's what's been sort of referred to in that yellow area, if you go to the next slide, as the Tumu development. We go to the next slide. Positioning your block there in that wider coastline. Next slide, please. And then again, another slide showing your block outlined in yellow, shaded in yellow, with Papamoa to the left and other land blocks to the right. And it's that sort of map that we wanted to focus on and say, all right, how might that land be utilised and developed for the future? For that balance that Paula's talked about between social, cultural, and of course commercial outcomes. The next slide you've seen before is far more detailed and looks at that zoning that I was talking about and starts to say, well, what might some internal housing and roadways and land use, sports grounds, employment opportunities, what that might all look like. This is just an indicative plan only. It was put forward by the council. It doesn't need to be adopted at all by owners. The zoning areas, those colours are important because they find a balance between land use and feasibility of all this happening. But within those zoning areas, there is scope for plenty of development aspirations to come forward. Where do you see yourselves in terms of your future? So you've seen that draft plan before. I won't go into it in detail. I'm just asking if we go to the next slide, and have we got someone there? Jeff, do you want to speak to this issue yourself? The other way is to just summarise it briefly from my end. I'm happy, or one of the trustees wants to speak to this slide. Sorry, it's just difficult to see the room.
Kia ora, Leo. I can touch on this slide for you quickly and just give a brief summary. As Leo has mentioned before, we've covered this slide and the slides you'll see shortly of previous presentations, but I'll give you a quick overview. So for those of you who were on the Whenua visit yesterday, we drove down the road along the eastern boundary, and Unuku and Malcolm pointed out some stakes in the ground. There was big orange stakes. Those stakes indicated where what we're calling the infrastructure corridors are proposed to cross that western boundary. And so this slide here shows you these two infrastructure corridors. And when we talk about infrastructure corridors, we're talking about the corridors that will provide transportation, so there'll be roads, but they'll also have within them electricity, water, wastewater and communications. So they're infrastructure corridors which are needed to service your block and also the blocks to the east. And so these are two key corridors that are required to unlock the entire growth area. So these slides show you where those corridors are proposed, the areas of those corridors, and in turn the proposal with regard to those corridors, as Leo's touched on earlier, for the land interest to be recognised. So the ability for those corridors and the interest in those corridors for council to run these services, how that will be compensated. So we might move quickly to the next slide. This slide touches on and summarises the benefits of these corridors to the owners, to the trust. So that the corridors, as I mentioned, unlock the ability to urbanise the land. Without those corridors, there's the ability to run infrastructure through to the land and obviously to the other blocks, but to look at the whole block as a urban growth area cannot be enabled. The other thing those corridors enable is for funding opportunities from government, and the Waioranga opportunity, which we are in discussions with the Ministry for Housing and Urban Development on for some capacity and capability funding, is key. These initiatives are key to getting that support from those government agencies. They also enable long-term land leases to be entered into, not only for commercial land, but for the residential land. So as this slide mentions, as we've discussed at previous hui, the option that the trustees are putting forward is to enable those corridors, access and use rights for those corridors for that infrastructure to be enabled. Discussions have been held with Tauranga City Council regarding easements over those corridors, and in exchange, in compensation for those easements, there is some land directly to the west that they are prepared to exchange those interests for, and we'll come to that shortly on the next slide. Please, trustees, jump in if you wish. This slide summarises where the lands are. So you can see the your block, the 14 block. To the west, there's what's called the PEI, that stands for Papamoa East Interchange land holdings. So there's some land either side of the proposed interchange. That interchange hasn't been built yet, but there's land which is surplus to council's needs either side of that interchange. Council has suggested that they may be able to compensate the interest in these corridors by providing that land to the Tumu Kaituna 14 Trust. And you can see there's the areas listed there. The surplus lands are 17 hectares, the two infrastructure corridors are 10 hectares, and there's also a 20 hectare active reserve proposed for your land. And that active reserve is to service the wider Papamoa East area. We'll move to the next slide. This is a detailed map of these surplus lands. So you can see on this map, the top of that image is your block, the 14 block. The interchange, if we can just jump back, sorry. The interchange, which is planned to be built in the next 2 years, is shown there. And that's just before the bridge. If you go down the eastern motorway from Tauranga, there's the bridge which crosses the Kaituna. This interchange is proposed just west of the bridge. So there's the two land parcels. It's currently commercially zoned land. It's already zoned for commercial uses. Tauranga City Council have commenced some engagement with Mana Whenua in Tauranga Moana regarding these blocks, as they're required to do under their policy. But there's the opportunity for this land to come into the ownership of the trust in compensation for the interest in these infrastructure corridors. We'll go to the next slide. So with regard to the compensation component, if the owners are in favour of this proposal, there's a process to negotiate how that exchange may work. And that will include getting professional valuers in. The trustees have already secured a very experienced valuer who hasn't started any work, but he's sitting there waiting to go if owners endorse this. And the trustees, together with the valuer, will work and negotiate with Tauranga City Council and their valuer to get the best commercial outcome for yourselves, for the owners. The costs of the valuer will be met by the council, and as noted here, the valuations will consider market valuation for the land on highest and best use, issues of betterment, and that picks up the discussion on the opening up the lands to the east and cultural value as well. The intention is the trustees, if this is endorsed through the resolutions which are going to be voted on later, not today obviously, and but later on, which we'll come to. If this is endorsed, the trustees would negotiate with council on that and bring the outcomes of that negotiation back to yourselves before it goes for Māori Land Court approval.
Thanks, Jeff. So if we just go back that previous slide, that's a good summary. Malcolm, others, you may wish to comment on this. I guess in just inviting you to do so, I was reflecting on Paula's question about, what's the commercial benefit to, say, him and his position as a shareholder? And there are a number of ways of answering that. But if you just take the potential land exchange areas that were referred to by Jeff, that's a commercial area sitting on either side of a proposed major intersection, and that sort of positioning and the income that could come from good lease of commercial land like that would go straight into the TK14 coffers and be available by way of dividends out to owners. That's the sort of tangible link to a commercial benefit there. And then there are other things that flow out from that, the opportunities for owners themselves to lease those blocks or to position their own businesses in that area, and the training and employment opportunities that come with that. And the other one I think was really important was, can you commercialise or take advantage of your strategic position there? Jeff's just talked about it there. This idea of betterment is a technical word, but it basically means if you're going to value what you are offering up by way of access rights, that valuer has to look at what does it mean by way of benefiting everyone else around you. And so therefore you can get a better commercial outcome by ensuring that you do exactly what Paul has said. You essentially commercialise the strategic advantage. You say that your position along that coastline is so important to everyone else that if you are going to be asked to have others cross over your land, then the quid pro quo for that should be much higher, because you are giving betterment to others. Does anyone else want to comment around the trustee table?
Kia ora, Leo. Just going on what you just explained, and we, the trustees, are not going to make any decisions until we bring it back to the owners also for their approval. So any negotiations or anything that we're going to be doing, with these compensation areas, it's not going to be done with the owners or the trustees only, but we will be bringing it back to the owners to see what their whakaaro and their decision is before we go to the final decision on the compensation for the whenua. Kia ora.
Just to, Jeff, thank you for that. Can I go back to, this map? This one here, Alex?
We haven't got that on. No, it's not on this.
Oh, bugger. Oh, sorry.
I'll go to that one.
Gee, I'm in a church hall. Basically, my point is that I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the lands to the east of our block are landlocked. Yeah?
Correct.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying we need to commercialise our strategic advantage in terms of access. And that might sound really matapiko of me, might sound greedy for us, but I know a situation of a hapu, one of the three hapu that are owners in this whenua, Rangitaurere. Recently, they had to pay a huge amount of money because they had a block that was landlocked and they had to pay a farmer a real premium to buy the access to that block. And there was no aroha here. It was a purely commercial decision that Bishop Farmer made. And so what I'm suggesting, and it probably occurred to, I mean, Malcolm's not slow on making money. It's something that's probably occurred to the trustees, but I would just urge us, you know, the land to the east of us is landlocked, and I don't want to hold them ransom, but if they want access to this development, and they're all, you know, I see the owners of 4 are basically Karis Hickston development interests. Site 10 is, well, that's not necessarily relevant, but that's Catalyst Limited. And then, of course, Site 11, which is the biggest part of this development, is the Ford landholdings. So I would just urge the trustees that, you know, we seriously look at what advantage we get as owners in terms of opening this area up for development. So that was all I wanted to say. I do have a, you know, Unuku, I get your whakaaro. You know, we need to reconnect our people to the hapu. But, you know, having one rangiwewehi go to the bi-monthly to talk to 30 rangiwewehi is like talking to the converted. The real challenge is the rangiwewehi that are not at the hui. So I think it actually comes just down to communication. And, you know, I reckon the trust should invest in a professional to track down owners. Never mind relying on us to tell Cuzzy Bro to sign up. You know, rather than, you know, I think the communication is a problem. We've got 5,000 owners. The most I've ever seen at a hui is about 100. You know, I think the investment is connecting to the owners. Rangiwewehi are the converted at the bi-monthlies. Rangi Taurere, they're there at their AGMs and their monthly hui, whatever. So, you know, let's reconnect with the owners. That's where the commitment needs to be. Not just the iwi, they'll understand. We just go to the bi-monthly and we say, I can't remember you fellas talking about Tumu Kaituna at the bi-monthly, mind you. That's untrue. You did raise it for the coastal claim. But anyway, they're my whakaaro. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Yeah, who's PCC? Who's PCC?
Tauranga City Council.
Oh.
Yeah, TCC. Yeah. So just an answer there, a note to Paura's question there, that all of the landowners past TK14 have access, legal access now through the right-of-way that the bus went down yesterday, down to the Ford block. That was put in by the Ford landholding company, who paid for the court processes and also paid the trust for that access right, which they had been using for gratis for a number of years. They fenced the right-of-way right through and metalled the road right through and allowed the water, power and telecommunications are provided for. On the other hand, speaking about a premium for letting those other blocks get access through the new road, the same question came up with Blue Haven, who bought those roadways to our boundary that we need to continue. And that question went through the landowners group with Blue Haven and Tauranga City Council, that if you're in development mode, that's what you need to do. You're getting access. Blue Haven got it from the farm ahead of them, and that's how it's worked down the block. Those blocks beyond us already have access, legal access. Yeah. So they could extend Papamore Beach Road down there. Yeah. We're just beautifying it and making it more accessible with those main arterials through our own block. And that's an answer to that. But thank you, Paura.
No, go ahead.
look just at the Tumu Kaituna 14, there's quite an extensive area that's earmarked, but not set in concrete, for light commercial development. And when you look at the next block, sort of the Hickson's now Paris, which is actually owned by TCC at the moment.
And Western Bay.
And Western Bay, and then Paris has the right of repurchase. You'll see that the amount of housing there is quite extensive, and the social, if you want to call it social side of it, comes down to sort of a school site here. Now, if you look on this side, a lot of you owners have expressed, you want to live on the land, and so what we're going to do a bit more here is there enough space for housing? That's the first question. And the second question is housing for what? And what I mean is housing for people, for our shareholders, but it might be housing that creates enough money to make it less expensive for our landowners. But the question then is that enough? You can see the active reserve area here, but that made sense if you know what was presented by the speaker at the sand mining. Remember that what he was saying there, to get it up to housing category means moving a lot more earth, a higher, better quality. But because this is basically where some of the sand mining is, you can get it to being reserve ready without so much hard work to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why it would make sense to be there. The other thing, like Paula was talking, making sure that the East really values what the Tumu Kaituna 14 is doing if we follow down this path. And that's one of them. But that's not a commercial outcome, so you can't have a rugby field and then charge rates for people to play on it, so to speak. The other thing too, I want to, that also around here, it's set up for a high school. Well, I'm a bit biased. I would rather that there was place guaranteed for Māori educational outcomes, plus a general one. But if we're going to be a Māori land block, let's put the Māori stuff up first, and then all the other stuff can happen later on. The $3 million home, you can see it just can't happen for all sorts of reasons along the coast. You had this thing sort of going out over the waves with an infinity pool.
It can happen if it happens all the way up Wāmoa. It can happen on this.
Well, yeah, it could happen because that was when things were much easier for those sort of things to happen. Rules have changed.
But you can put in a whole school or a whole rugby court or...
But not on the coast. I'm referring to the coast. And
he's going into detail that you shouldn't.
I was kind of talking to you. Is that let's get to the position where we're the best protectors of the land. Because now they're putting all sorts of things on our land blocks. Must have this many meters between us and all whatever. How about we get in front of that and we get better at looking after the land than what we're required to look after the land. But coming back to what I was trying to say,
it's just too hard to hear. You're going backwards and forwards, and we are online find it really difficult to hear. If you can go to the microphone and have your kōrero, please.
Yeah, and I'll just bring Charlene with me. So if we've got to get the mix of housing right to meet that demand of our shareholders, but no good living in a house if you haven't got somewhere to work or your children to work. So these are sort of the areas that need some real thinking about. And also to think about, can housing be an income for us in other ways too? So, Paul, I don't know if that really answers directly with you, but I think when we're looking about commercial outcomes, we've got to think a bit smarter to achieve that. All right, I'm putting Charlene back now. Leo.
Kia ora.
Can I go back to the slide of the swapping lands? the one they're trading off. There's more to that too. Yeah, it was just with the circle.
That one?
And with the count, or
No,
the,
back.
yeah, that one. Oh, and the other one. I'll go to that one, please. Okay, so we're trading off. Can you bring that other one with the circle here in front of an hour?
Please speak to the microphone. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. So we're trading off for that purple land. That's right.
The one with the infrastructure corridors with the red green.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we saw that yesterday on the bus. The one with the red
One
around
with the
it.
red ring on
In
it,
the middle.
with the 2 infrastructure corridors.
Yeah. If you look at that
That one.
on our whenua, that takes up a lot of land. Just that alone. We can't do anything here, as you fellas say. We've got the back piece here. You just want to build a school. A lot of it doesn't benefit us. Doesn't benefit us at all. I can't stand this. This is shit, if you ask me. It doesn't help us at all. And then you want us where? We're looking for housing for our people because of the council. Then they'll own this, manage this, of the little we have. We have F4. That's what I heard from that councilman. That one there. Oh.
I'm not council.
Who are you?
I'm an advisor to the trustees.
So from there, they take over that, which unlocks all this here. So now they got the right, they'll make all the money, because they're unlocking it for all East, not us.
They're not on the roadways. The roadways go through whether that's there or not.
But that unlocks it for the East. All of this, that's what I heard. It unlocks it for all of them.
It's the
east side of
roadways
us.
that unlock it, dear. It's the roads.
No, there's something wrong with this. There's bugger all for us there. I can't build my $3 million house and everybody else. I'm only saying that. It's not, we've got land over here that we don't even know, which is close to the link. It's so loud and noisy for houses and things like that. They're probably giving us the shittiest land. Why won't they do all their stuff on their land that they've got? There's something going on here. And that's why I don't like this. This is the first time I've seen it. This is no good for us. There's no benefits for us. You want us to get a dividend? I've been in lands for years. Dividend, next minute, dwindles, down to nothing. They got $1 million blocks and everything like that. What does the shareholder get? F all. We get bugger all. This is what's going to happen on this land. For the little bit that we've got, that we're trying to hold on to, for us. Bugger all of this. Put us our houses. If someone wants to do a business, put that on there. There's TPK that will help us with infrastructure, to get the roads in, to do the power, to do all of that. But you want to do it this way. It's shit. Shit. It hurts my heart. I'm mamai. That's all I got to say.
Did you go on the farm trip yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah? Well, you'd have seen those areas there, the size of them. There's plenty of room for housing that's marked here in the yellow.
From what I heard from Uanuku, we don't have much places for housing. That was his last when he got up here.
That's Uanuku, but I'm telling you, there's plenty of room for housing. Yes.
Yeah, show us. Because this sounds like this proposal is going through whether we like it or not, because you're ticking the boxes. This hui, that hui, that hui, that hui. Ticking the boxes. At the end of the day, we really got no say. It's you guys.
That's why we bring it back to these hui. And so, thank you for your comments. Thank you. Just an answer to a lot of those comments there, that an active reserve, which is that big green space that you're talking about now, benefits all of the people in the houses around, all their kids who go to the school, they have that for tennis, for rugby, all of those, they're the active reserve. Excuse me, wait till I finish there. Thank you. And just listen for a moment while I'm explaining it. Thank you. And so, as I said, an active reserve is very necessary for all the housing around there, that the kids have somewhere to go for tennis and for whatever facilities. There'll be sports facilities galore. With the school there, all of those will be owned or leased by the trust. So when you're saying there's no benefit to us, there certainly is. And it could well be paid up front, which would help with the development costs. So thank you. That was one person's view. You all have a chance to have a view on that.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Are we beholden to Tauranga Council? Are we beholden to Tauranga Council, the land itself?
Absolutely not. Oh, only even paying the rates.
Can we make sure that a couple of things, just so that we keep on track here. Firstly, those who are wishing to speak, can you go to the microphone and give your name? Secondly, can we make sure that those who are speaking are heard, whoever they may be, until they've finished speaking, so that we don't get cutting across each other? And also, can we just keep our language appropriate inside the whare and in terms of our hui, please? So I think there was a comment being asked of you, Malcolm, by somebody. If that person can just go to the microphone, please.
Kia ora hamuera.
I think our main problem has always been our problem is communications for us, the landowners. And this is my point why I stood up in 2005 trying to get the information on what's happening with our whenua, with our whenua of the three hapu. And we never got that information from Pukero or Ruawata. We did, like I said. But the thing what I'm hearing now is the same thing. We are still trying to find out what's going on. Where's the bigger picture? And I think if we can start networking amongst the whānau, the hapu, and the trustees, then I think we'll kia whakamaara mahokinga. And that's what we really need to come to, ne? Ngami atu te.
Kia ora. We've talked about communication, and it is a critical one. So those earlier speakers who have mentioned they've been to some of the earlier hui, but not all. This is a genuine consultation process, absolutely genuine. So if the feedback is causing the concerns that you've raised, I would ask that firstly you understand a bit more about what's being proposed around the benefits, and then participate by being able to provide feedback as to alternatives, and then also cast your vote, of course. The area of the active reserve and the two infrastructure corridors, that's a significant area, and the proposal is that it retains fully in trustee ownership, and that you get commercial benefit off that for the wider block that's been unlocked there in terms of your housing and employment opportunities. But there are ways of receiving feedback from you around how to achieve that balance. So I think it's really important to have those comments received, but also important that you get to know the proposal underneath it and be able to feed back into that detail. Communication is a two-way street. So I've enjoyed hearing that kōrero, and I think it's great contributions from everybody actually. I note that there's a comment some of you may not have seen online from Arthur Flintoff, just around the access to the Ford and the Caris blocks, and that the current access is not actually a public access, because if that access was public already, then the council wouldn't be offering this land in exchange for an easement. I think there's work to be done in that regard around the actual nature of the access way. But just wanted to record your comments there, Arthur, so that those in the hui can also hear them. You also support, I think, Paora and others trying to leverage the situation, that if access is going to be granted, you leverage that for the best return. And Arthur's also saying about making sure that you are strong kaitiaki, influential kaitiaki, as I heard him at the last week, over that whole area, so that the trust and the owners exercise their kaitiakitanga across the entire coastline there and the development. So I think that's good kōrero, thank you. All right, is there another speaker who wants to contribute?
Kia ora, my name is John Hodge. I've been coming to these meetings for nearly 30 years, you know, and it's the same thing. Today what I hear is what I heard 30 years ago. Everything changes, every meeting you go to, there's a new idea coming up, but it's never followed through, you know. If we're going to stand here and then keep on arguing, I'll have to wait another 30 years, which I won't be around, to get things done. Now, how do you get things done when you say that we're not going to lose our land, or not going to lose our land, when a couple of slides along there you've got private ownership on there? Private ownership isn't on Māori land. Well, what is it? You know, what is that private?
You're owning the house, not the land.
What if you do what this other entity is doing? Why can't you do it that way? You know, this other entity is we put the house on the land for the whānau, right? And they pay a rent. You know, okay, that's what they pay a rent to us, right? So but to build the houses, you get other entities to build it, and they'll, you know, between the two of us, we can, you know, the meeting that I went to yesterday, which I couldn't go to, they took ownership of it, and they got other entities to build the houses and make it available. At the moment, they're putting old people in. So the houses that they're making, this is at Linmore, they move in, they pay something like $300,000 to get in, right? And then when they pass away, the family gets about 70% of their money back. But that house is still ours. The house is still belong to. But you know, you got to look into that you can do it your way. You know, not you don't have to copy them. You know, or do it your way and make it our way. You know, we need to move on. You know, these meetings are, you know, you fellas are magicians. You know. You say one thing and you do something else, you know. So we have to, you know, we have to put a stop to this and make sure that everybody here knows. You know, I knew exactly what these people were doing yesterday. Today, I'm still confused. You know, today, from the 30 years ago.
Just jumping the gun a bit because we're just coming up to the housing situation, which will be explained.
I want to hear that, but just listening to that, the one person over there, he was saying, you know, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do that. Yeah, that's what you said 30 years ago. This is what we're going to do, and we're still here, doing nothing. You know? So, you know, just to me, just get on with it and make sure that when we leave here, everybody here knows exactly what you're going to do. That's all I want. Thank you.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, just thank you for that. A couple of comments. One is the private ownership question was about a potential to own a house, not private ownership of the land. The rental question you put forward is a really good one, and that's on the slide as well. In other words, you could rent a house and use the land that the house sits on, and that rental income could come back to the trust. So totally agree with that. The idea of just getting on with it, you've got to find a balance, of course. The trustees can only get on with something if the owners give their support. So I think this consultation process is important, and the trustees wouldn't be able to just plough ahead without making sure the owners were in support. And finally, making sure that everyone's really clear. I'm sorry that you're feeling confused. I think part of the discussion is, you know, that these are complex issues, and they all interrelate. So we just be kind to each other and work it through. And I've been trying to run hui in as transparent a manner as possible. So if there are further questions about the details of it, this is the time to ask, and after the hui as well, and we'll provide that information to you. Thanks for the contribution, Matua. I was going to suggest that we move on to the environmental impacts. So we've just got a couple of slides there. People have been testing this, I think, rightly so, you know, with climate change and the rest of it. That map sets out the natural hazards predictions, both in terms of your land and the broader coastline there. It also looks at the significant wāhi tapu areas, the mahinga kai areas, the waterways, and the like. So that's why when you look at those sort of areas, it's proposed that any development plan has to take that into account. It has to future-proof for generations to come. There are some areas of land that are better for housing, better for commercial development, and better left alone entirely. The following slide just gives you some details of the environmental reports that have been taken through, and these are now being put up on the website. So feedback on these would be really good, and particularly looking at the sea level rise and the potential there for what impacts it might have along that coastline. So that point down the bottom of the slide, the reports to date, the investigations that have been undertaken, have determined that the risks to urban development within this area are low, or can be designed to mitigate those potential impacts. Now, I'm not an expert in this, and I'm just, there was a request to table some of this information, environmental information. Can I just say this, we're at such an early stage. So if the owners were prepared to allow the trustees to go ahead and negotiate some of these proposals, all of this would have to be analysed tooth and nail to see whether actually would be feasible. So at this stage, as I can indicate, the trustees are relying on expert reports to suggest it is feasible, that there's some areas that would not be good for building, and they have to take that into account. So those are a couple of slides and some more information on the website around the environmental impacts. I'll just go back to where we were. And what my proposal is, we've reached 12 o'clock. I'm thinking that I'm happy to facilitate further queries now. We've got one further section to come, and that's looking at what those proposed resolutions might be if they were going to be put out to voting. So that moves our hui into another space really, because we're looking at some of the detail. So just staying at this topic, we've got housing, some of the infrastructure corridors, environmental kōrero. I'm going to propose that we have just a stretch and a toilet break for 5 minutes, and then come back and deal with our last section for our hui after that. Alex, can you just tell me if the hui are okay with that, having a 5-minute stretch?
Sound good? Right, yep, yes, Leo.
Okay, so it's 12:03 now. If we come back at 10 past 12, please, and we can resume our kōrero. So can we go to the next slide, please? This section is just dealing with what the next steps might be, particularly around getting owner views. So firstly, the slide looks at what the process would be for voting on resolutions. There would be another hui yet to happen after this one, but ultimately the proposal is to put some of this kōrero to the vote so that owners out there can show their support or otherwise. Oh, sorry, am I going too fast? Do we don't want to start yet?
You're right, Leo.
So the first thing is what the process will be for voting. You'll see that voting is one vote for each owner. That's pretty standard. That includes the whānau trusts. But the proposal is also that the number of shares you hold would also be recorded. And that's a relevant consideration when you come to decide, and the Māori Land Court comes to decide on the support for these proposals. The idea is to appoint an independent returning officer for the voting. And then going down to that next half of that slide, the voting method, postal votes will be sent out, but also we want to make sure that you can download those off the website and submit them back electronically. This is, in my experience, the best balance, because relying on post to go out and post to come back in is really clumsy. The post has not been good. The database of postal addresses is not strong, and that's the case with all Māori land blocks. I note, Paori, your comment about investing in a strong comms person to reach out to owners. That is happening, but I think it's an important suggestion and proposal. So those votes would go out, and you could download them onto your phones or computers, fill them out, and then either scan them and email them back or post them back. And that's proposed to be happening in sort of July through to August. So this is a proposal, and again, seeking feedback as to how we get the best balance of owner involvement. There are a number who cannot attend hui physically, and by way of a postal vote, we're hoping to, really capture as many owners as possible. And then the next two slides look at what the resolutions might be on those two big topics. The first topic is the trustee elections. So this is just a draft text that I put forward to sort of say, all right, let's read this out and see if this was on a voting form, is this the type of language that people could be invited to cast a vote on. So the first resolution might be something like this, that the trust applies to the Māori Land Court. So you vote yes or no on this. That's what the request would be. Not today. Can I make that very clear? This is not a voting today. This is just talking about what the votes might look like. That the trust applies to the court for an amendment to your trust order, amendment to your constitution, to allow for new rules for a trustee rotation and election system. And it would be based on 7 trustees to hold office for 4 years. So that's a very different change from what you've got now. An election for 2 trustee positions every 2 years. So that starts from 2023. So every 2 years, you'd have 2 trustees standing down, and they'd be eligible to stand again if they wanted to. Trustees would be asked to submit a CV showing some sort of experience or an ability to contribute to land governance or financial management or tikanga Māori. The reason for that, as we've discussed at previous hui, is because this is a major job, and trustees who are seeking to stand should be able to show to the other owners what skills they bring to the table. And then we've talked about this idea of having at least 3 of the 7 trustees positions make sure that they can receive an endorsement from the constituent hapu, the 3 hapu of the land. But once they become trustees, they're there for everybody, as all trustees are. So that would be a suggestion for a resolution to try and capture what that is. And if the owners said yes to something like that, then the amended trust order would have to go through to the Māori Land Court for approval. One of the questions is, well, finding a balance between, do you want the actual clause do you want the actual amended clause in the trust order put out to all the owners? I would be in favour of that. I think that having some sort of draft text should be accessible to owners so they can really look at the details. But this proposal really tries to capture at a high level what the rotation might look like. The other final comment is just to note that there is going to be an election this year regardless of this process, because there have been some vacancies in the trust. So an election would be happening anyway for 2 trustee positions this year. And then this proposal here would kick in for another 2 starting next year. All right. So you've seen that slide previously and we've talked about it. Unless there are specific questions or comments on that, I was going to go to the next slide. So just looking around the room or around those online.
We've got a question there Leo?
Just a question, Leo. Would all of those resolutions, all of those points, would they have to be considered as part of one resolution? Or, for instance, could you propose the first 3 points, 7 trustees for 4 years, etc., and leave the last point, which is the hapu endorsed seats, as another question?
Kia ora. Very good suggestion, and yes, you could do that.
Someone at the back there, you want to come up to the microphone just up here? Someone just came out for kōrero. Oh, just for our ones online so they can hear you as well.
My name. I've just got a question for you with regards to part 1, 2, an election of 2 trustee positions every 2 years. Now, with 2 existing trustees to stand down each election, will they be the 2 longest serving trustees?
Go.
Are you? Well, you, but when you go into this process is what I'm talking about.
Yes.
It will be? Thank you.
When the 2 positions drop down, if they don't get re-elected, the 2 trustees to replace them, can you make sure that they know what they're doing? You know, be a working trustee instead of just sitting down there doing nothing, please. Thank you.
That'll be up to the people voting for them. Okay.
Any further kōrero? No, ka pai Leo.
The next resolution again is looking at the development proposals, and this is draft and is the subject of considerable kōrero yet to come. But it might look something like this, that in order to facilitate the development of Tumu Kaituna 14 land in accordance with the trustee guiding principles, the Tumu Kaituna 14 trustees are authorised by the owners to negotiate with the Tauranga City Council the granting of access and use rights to the parts of the land shown as infrastructure corridors and active reserves. So we've talked about that. And that would be through easements or long-term leases on the basis that, 1, the trustees act in accordance with those trustee guiding principles. The trustees are prohibited from selling any part of the land. The trustees obtain best value compensation for those access and use rights by way of either additional ownership of land and or, it'd probably be both, financial compensation, and that the trustees return to owners with full details of any negotiated agreement for consultation before final agreement. So there's a process requirement there to come back and consult with owners, because there's so much detail to be thought through that this is really just a high level idea of getting owners to suggest, is this a way that they would authorise the trustees to commence these negotiations with the council. And the idea is that these guiding principles being clearly explicit in your resolution means that the trustees have to continue to operate within those principles for the benefit of the TK14 owners. So just opening up some kōrero around that. I'm not asking you to support the resolution or not. That's not the point. We're just trying to say, well, if this was to go forward, how might we try and word it in a way that captures the proposal?
Just got someone coming up with that.
Kia ora, I'm Ura Hodge. Now that sounds good to me. And these are the guidelines of what a trustee has to do in this regard. And we just got to know that. And from our own whānaus, we've got to be able to put things in the right priority. places. So that helps. That helps. We'll start.
Matua, just before you go off the microphone, can I just ask you to state your name clearly, because I was just taking some notes.
Hamuera Hodge.
Hamuera Hodge. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
Any further kōrero? Lots of nods. Looks okay for now.
So let's look at the next steps then, at the next slide, please. Just to reiterate around the owner feedback, there's plenty of avenues for you to be able to feed into this process. There was a comment earlier about this is all a done deal. I can just tell you that's not the case. That's not the case. In fact, some of the one I'm going to get in from owners was really good around opening up some of this other ideas around urban development, marae, health centres and the like, all of which are really important. So have the confidence that if you are going to provide some feedback, it will be really heard and responded to. There will be a further hui in June. I think we have set that, help me please, I think it's the 17th of June. Somebody there can confirm.
18th of June?
My apologies. The 18th of June is the further hui. From there, depending on what happens at that hui, postal voting process would commence through July and August. There would still be trustee elections this year, so look out for that. And then depending on the results of all those processes and any further negotiations and the like, there would have to be court applications, returning to owners for consultation, and then a whole lot of mahi would happen after that to try and make this a reality. As one of the speakers said, get on with it and make it a reality. And if the owners give the green light for that, I think that that would certainly be the case. There seems to be real impetus for that. So that's where we're heading for the next couple of months, and ask you to please get out to your whānau and make sure that those who are interested, hopping on the website, getting information, asking questions, and coming along to the next hui. Do we have a venue, trustees, for the next hui, or that's to be discussed yet, eh?
To be decided.
Oh, kia ora, Lorraine Galvin again. You rushed through the voting, proposed voting. Can we go back to that, please? There was a couple of choices with the votings.
One more slide up, please, for the speaker.
These two, yeah. Having read it, because they, like you say, they're proposals. However, voting by number of shares will also be recorded and used as relevant consideration in decision-making to ensure that we capture fairly the level of support. So what you're saying is if you've got more shares, your vote counts more than anybody else.
No, that's not what I said.
No, but that's what I'm asking you the question. That's what I'm reading into. Am I looking at it the wrong way?
Kia ora. The Māori Land Court requires a one vote, one owner, right? So that's the first and basic premise, is that everyone's vote is equal. What the court then says is, depending on the nature of that vote, how can we make sure that as part of our consideration, we don't have, say, just a few owners who own an enormous number of shares dominating the vote. And therefore, what I've called it is a relevant consideration. It's not to say that it is the be-all and end-all, but the number of shares that are being cast is regarded by the court as really relevant to make sure that you get a good balance in the vote.
So it doesn't matter how many shares. I mean, I've seen it before, where people go around and they ask all the ones with the big shares, come in and vote, come in and vote. And that's been going on for a long time. And that's how a lot of these things get won, is because people, they go and push the bigger shareholders. And yet the ones, I've only got small shareholders, but does my one vote count as what I'm saying against somebody who's got, say, 300 more than me? That's what I'm after, because otherwise, what a waste of time me coming in here if my vote's not going to count at the end of the day.
Well, I can only just repeat what I've said, is that your vote does count and is the baseline of everything that happens from then. So your vote as a small shareholder is just as valuable as the vote of a large shareholder.
Okay, thank you.
Any other kōrero on that? And I'm really grateful you stood up and said that. So we're talking about how to make sure the votes are fair.
Yeah, the method of this voting, this email and all this modern stuff, doesn't go with the real owners and the Kamatua people. They don't respond to this email and all this sort of thing. Had you noticed in the past who's you've had, very few Kamatuas are on there, emails and all that sort of thing. The old method is what they know. I think you should look at ways of how to get to them. I don't know how you're going to do it, but sort of thing just out of date, not up to it. Only fellas like him know how to play this game. The Kamatuas are not there, they're the owners. Hey. So.
Can I just have your name, Matua?
Oh, Raukawa, Manahi.
So thank you for that. No, that's a great. Firstly, the electronic thing is just an addition. It's not. So a kaumātua who receives something in the post is perfectly entitled to post their vote back. Absolutely. And the electronic stuff is just trying to make it easier for everyone, not to take away that. But I'm thinking too, you know, trustees, it might be a good idea if we had an ability for kaumātua to come along physically to Ohinimutu at some point during the postal voting and put their piece of paper into a box. Something that we could allow them to come physically to a place that's central. So I'm happy to look at that as way of extending opportunities for the kaumātua to be able to put their piece of paper somewhere that they know they've had their vote.
John. Aroha mai, sorry to be a waha. Hey, just a question, and I missed this one, Leo, is I missed it on the eligibility to be a trustee, because originally you were proposing that you must be an owner or a descendant of an owner, and that seems to be missing from the eligibility. Can you answer that one first?
Kia ora. So yes, that should be added as an explicit bullet point for you. It was almost taken, Paora, but I hear your request. The idea is that those who stand for a trustee position must either be an owner or descended from an owner.
Kapai. Okay. I don't really want to, because I think that possibly other speakers will speak to these resolutions, and I don't really want to open a can of worms for you, but I just wanted to assist our cousin to building her $3 million house. And that really was, I think there was a basic not misunderstanding, but I think there was an opportunity for the Trust to talk about the number of houses that are proposed on the block. So from my understanding, you've got, can you go to this map?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I've got it. Unuku, this is your job. You're the...
No, just take Charlene, she's portable.
You're the carrier. So just looking at, I mean, people probably know this or understand this. It's just that, you know, I've just alighted upon it today, so I'm enthusiastic. So these areas, where are we? Yeah. Okay, so these areas here, this one here, and this one here, and this one. So they're both general residential zone and medium density residential zone and high density residential zone. The high density is this one. And I just had a chat to Jeff and Malcolm before, and their understanding is that there's about 1,500 houses that will be put on the whenua. So although you might not be on the beachfront, and believe you me, that's not necessarily an advantage because, you know, with sea erosion and sand dune erosion, it's kind of hazardous, but there's still opportunity for really good sites, you know, to build whare on the whenua. And as I say, you know, 1,500 houses is pretty good. So I think there is opportunity for the cousin to have your $3 million house, if you pay for it, and if you so wish. So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora, John Hodge again. Can you go back to the voting, please? That two choices you had? Yeah. Well, I just said, you say one thing, whānau trust equal one vote. Equal one vote. Then underneath you say, decision maker will ensure that we capture because they're relevant shares in a decision making to ensure that we capture fairly level support. Level support for who? For the people who's got a lot of money, or the people a lot of shares, or the people who's got part shares. Here, you've got two things up there. You tell us one thing, and then you tell us another thing. Like magicians, like I said, there's nothing will get done if you keep putting things like that up.
Well, I drafted it, so I can tell you I'm no magician. I want to make sure that you understand this so that you can feel comfortable. The underlined statement is the baseline of what has to happen under Whanahu Whenua Trust, that every owner is entitled to a vote. And because you have a whānau trust who's an owner, they are entitled to a vote too. That's just the statement that carries the day in terms of the voting. Now, on something as complex as this, there is a risk that you could have a number of owners who have small shares, who perhaps the participation rate on the vote is low, and the court would be concerned to make sure that it's got an idea of what's the flavour of support amongst the owners. So first and foremost, it doesn't take it away from any of what I've just said. There is one vote per owner. But I'm just being realistic that the Māori Lane Court always, on a thing as major as this, says, and how does that reflect in terms of shareholding as well? It's a relevant consideration. And by relevant consideration, I mean they take it into account in terms of trying to assess whether the Māori Land Court should approve what the owners have requested. So again, it's not trying to be tricky dicky. It's simply saying this is what the court process is all about.
I'll be nice. Can we go back to the map that was it Paula had? Yeah. So I would like to put it to the trust, put it forward to the trust. When you come to the next hui, can you show us where our houses may be? So this one here, council, shows all these. This is their line, but they want to put the high school on our side. But that's fine. But at least show us where we may be, where we may be living, whether it be that land that they said over here or here. Okay. Okay, so one of these ones, this one.
The yellow ones.
Oh.
The main at the top there, those
Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Okay. So those are houses.
Yeah.
Is that 1,500 houses?
Those are
all up?
roads between them.
So those are roads,
Yeah.
not houses?
No.
So, well, next time when you come, can you show us? Oh, those are the roads and the houses are all in there. Now I got you.
Houses inside to give
Okay.
1,500.
Okay, that sounds good. That looks, yeah. Okay then. Yeah. Awesome.
Ka pai?
Ka pai.
Thank you for coming up and asking that question. So I've just made a note of that. I think that we can also take this map and blow it up even larger for you and provide that information, because it's not just the yellow areas, it's that little orange, well, large orange area, lightly orange area too, which is what we call the higher density or medium density zones. By that I mean you would have a mix of housing options on your whenua. Some of them may even be, 2-level apartments. Some may be houses that are single level. So the idea of showing the different...
2 and 3 level
Yeah.
allowed there.
And I hear the request for some detail on that, and we'll work away at our team to come back with some more information for you.
Okay.
Sorry, kia ora, Ricky Lee Ainsworth. Just for our whānau there, just so you get if you zoom in on that map, a better idea. If you zoom up to that corner where the white part is, yeah, right up the top. Those are all the existing houses that are on Papamoa now, so that gives you an idea of the size of the houses, what they're looking at.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
All right, we're at 1:45 now. I'm thinking that we are coming to a close for this part of our hui and our process. Alex, can you give me an indication, please, if that's right, and we can start to close our hui?
Yep. We got any further kōrero on those resolutions or anything in particular? Yep. I don't mind.
Kia ora tātou whānau, ko Matiri Duncan tōku ingoa. I came with my queers here this morning, and we're from the Whareroa whānau of Ngāti Uenuku Kōpako. We live in Tauranga Moana, and I've been involved with the Ngā Pōtiki housing space. We did some developments over in what we call now Manawa. It was the Te Hauhau block that was given back through the treaty settlements back to Ngā Pōtiki and Ngaiterangi. So I just want to sort of ask a question around some housing options, because we have several. We have housing ownership, we have housing rental, we have housing LTOs, licensed to occupy, and then we also have commercial and kaumatua. We're looking at that commercial and kaumatua is the future development for us. So I'm looking, is it something that perhaps we should all wānanga around some of those housing options, and what's really the background behind some of those things? It was a lot of work on our part, especially when trying to decide on who are ready for housing to move in, who's got deposits. We also organised financial literacy for whānau to help them to get, to save and to look at whether they're able to pay a mortgage or rent and stuff like that. So I think those things are really important. It may be something that we should start doing that process now. All right, so I'm just offering that up. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Good comments here, I think. They'll all be taken into consideration. Yeah. Any further kōrero?
Yeah, I've got a question that's come through on chat from Arthur, which I can respond to. What's happening with the proposal that all the trustees stand down and put themselves forward for re-election? The answer of that tono that was put forward to the trustees, Arthur, has been that they believe that the trustee elections this year and then the trustee rotation proposal for next year will essentially see 4 trustee positions come up over the next 12 months, and that achieves the right balance between all standing down and what is currently the case where no one needs to stand down because they're there for life. So that's the trustee proposal to move forward with the elections this year and elections next year under rotation. All right. Thank you everybody for allowing me to facilitate, which is an honour to be able to work with the owners on this huge kōrero. Can I just reiterate, it's such a early stage of what is an incredibly important and developed proposal over many years really. And that comment from our last speaker about the housing wānanga, I think is really, really important. So thanks for that contribution as well. I'm going to hand it back to our trustees there and wish you all the best for the next stages of our hui process. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Yep, so questions has been asked about getting access to the digital copy of the slides. We'll make sure like a recording of this presentation as well as the slides and the minutes are all available on the Trust website. Yeah, if that's okay.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora koutou. Aro, e mua I te karakia, na kāre kore kua hōha Charlene I taku kōrero I tana ingo. Engari, kuia te mea I ki, hei muri I te hui, koina te wā pai mo te kaputi. Nō reira, kia karakia, kia amutu te karakia, kāri te he kai, he kaputi anō mā koutou, nō reira, kau e o mātu, nō reira. Koina, he hui, he mihi nui kia koutou kua haramai ki konei, e te o koutou tēnei te hui tua rua, tua toru, tua whā, kei te mihi ki tō koutou maia, kua rongo koutou mo te hui e whai atu ni tēnei ko te 18, ne? O hune? O reira, tērā pēr ka kite anō tātou ia tātou. Hei ahara, ko te mea nui tēnei wā ki inoi tātou, ko te inoi e mohina tātou katoa, tēnei na, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ari ki au karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene. Ana, mā tete o koutou te kai e whakapaipai, ne? Ai, tukunatu kia koutou.